Okay, hello, welcome back to another one of my video log recording sessions where I talk about genetic algorithms, or maybe genetic algorithm, just one singular form. This video session is an appendix to the last video that I did, which was the first one of tracking entities throughout the evolution iteration, throughout the generations, or maybe a way to track them, how each individual entities behave as generations pass. And I just wanted to add a few things before moving on to the next topic. Well, mostly because I would have to terminate the runtime on my MacBook. So, yeah. That's why I'm doing this. I'm adding this bit at the end. The date is 2025, April 28th. Okay. So, in this appendix, I wanted to, full disclosure, or rather, it's not anything, big or grandiose. It's just that I wanted to I should say that I wanted to do this, or I should have done this, and I could have done this in my previous video, but I didn't, because I was just too lazy. But today I found the time to do it, and it is that I wanted to get a grasp of for how long the entities lived or survived, and in these three big categories. The first one being the world, as in the final state of the world. The second one, the entities that were struck out because they went over the threshold. Third group being the limited entities, the entities that got limited out of the population. Yep. So let's get to it. So in the final state of the world, there are 1,000 entities, and in the current version or the state of how the entities are designed, I could get their ages by measuring the length of their chromosomes, because in this version of how things are done, every generation would add every generation would force every entity to go through mutation, and the mutate function would add because the mutate function is at the very end, the mutate function would add the new slightly mutated chromosomes at the end of the list of chromosomes. So, by measuring that, I could get their age. I could get the ages of entities. So I did that, and I got the minimum ages, which is 2. Yeah, which is obvious, because there are 500 generations, and the minimum the latest entity would have been created in Well, maybe there could have been one. It would have been created in generation 499, or the second last generation. And well, yeah, and then the next generation, the last generation would come, and then it would have aged by one more generation, or maybe just 1 year. Right now, the generation is almost the same thing as year in human terms, but that will change in the future. And the maximum in the list of ages was 164, so which is quite long. And we've had a look at that one, which is this one. What's it called? Illidan Bolvar. And this is how it's how his some utility history went. So that's that. And here's the distribution of the ages. You can see it's quite skewed to the right. Well, almost like a, well, not exponential, but almost like a log normal distribution. Yep. And then I would do the same for the entities that were struck out. There were 2,118 entities, and I go through the same process, and the minimum age was again 2. Yeah. And the maximum age here was 148. And the average was 7.35. In the world, the average was 27.139. And in struck out, it's 7.35. Which is, which can be understood as, well, let me rephrase that. This may be due to the fact that the ones who are struck out were usually the ones who are already carrying a lot of genes, who had many genes activated, and therefore also had higher summed constraint scores, higher summed constraint values. So, and then once they go through mutation, many of them would go above the threshold in terms of some constraint values, and they would be struck out. However, the also here, the maximum one is almost 148 generations old. So, about the same. 164 compared to 148. That's quite remarkable, I guess. And then here are the distribution. We have a lot of entities just being struck out at at generation during their second generation. This is more exponential decay, rather. So that's that. For the entities that were limited out of the population, there were 11,892 entities, and the minimum of the ages was 3, and the maximum was 248. So that's really, really long. And the average was 39.53 generations. And when we look at the distribution, this is also still skewed to the right. However, it does look quite a lot more normal than these two pictures. But still kind of, skewed to the right. And here, when we have a look at the longest surviving entity, this is how it went, how its summed utility history went. You can see that it started quite high, and then it fell down, kept falling down after this slight increase, and then it came back up, goes back down again, comes back up slightly, kind of stays there, oscillating, until it falls back down again. Same as Mike Zulu. Mike falls back down again, and this is when it got limited out of the population because it was so ranked low. It was ranked so low, and it had to be excluded. So the most important thing, or things, would be that the average age of entities that remain in the final state of the world is 27.139. For the struck out entities, it's 7.35. Very kind of short lived. And for the limited, it's 39.53. So it seems that when given, a graph like this, a plot like this, if an entity starts, somewhere here, it will pretty soon, quite soon enough, sooner than we would like, just hit the threshold. Well, this is actually the horizontal line for summed utilities, but since in most cases summed utility goes hand in hand with summed constraint, so this entity right here would very soon go above the threshold and be struck out. However, if an entity were to start somewhere here, maybe here, or even here, it would exist for quite some time. Like that. Until they get limited out of the population, like here. So, and for those entities who do start high, but don't get struck out, they usually just fall down slightly. Yet it is still a downward slope. So the goal that I would have to set, the goal in my mind is that I would like to have more entities with a slope that goes upwards, upward slope, something like this, more than how I have it now. And I want more entities to live longer, so that even when they are struck out, they live longer than, more than 7.35 on average, or in terms of the world, more than 27, and maybe in limited, 50. So let's mark that again, 27 to 35 to 50 and then 7.35 to maybe 10 to 15, and for the limited entities 39.53 to maybe 45 to 60. Well, for the limited, having more population would well, having a higher max population would solve that, pretty much. Having higher max population and smaller number of offsprings every generation. For the struck out, this is something different. This is something totally different. Because I would have to make sure that the entities are less likely to go above. But I can't do that explicitly, because then that's not the kind of beats the purpose of natural selection and evolution. Yeah. And for the world, well, if these two things happen, the average lifespan of entities that are left in the final state of the world would also increase, would also, go up. So these two things. I need to fix these two things. Okay. Well, that's about it. I know I said it was going to be an appendix, but it still ended up being 17 minutes. Okay. Well, too bad. That's about it. See you next time. Bye.